So here is stop talking, please. This is an example of a worksheet 1 problem. So the directions would say like, find the exact value of theta or whatever, use the unit circle, blah, blah, or something to that effect. Find your answer in radians, yada, yada, yada. So let's start by figuring out what quadrant the terminal side of our angle lies in. So if I'm looking at the first part, sine theta equals negative root 2 over 2, sine is the same as y.
Tan is y over x.
Yes. So where's the y coordinate negative? What quadrants? So down here, right? Below the x-axis. So Q1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is quadrant 3 and 4. You good with that? You just start in the top right and it goes counterclockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, okay?
Yeah.
Same way we draw our angle, right? Now let's figure out what quadrants are covered by the angles from 3 pi over 2 to 5 pi over 2. So I'll draw those angles. So I'm going to start on the positive x-axis. Because both of those angles are positive, I rotate counterclockwise. So that's a half a pi, 1 pi, 1 and a half, that's the same thing as 3 over 2. 2 pi, and then 2 and a half, that's the same thing as 5 pi over 2. So I covered here quadrants 1 and 4. So my answer needs to be in quadrant 4. Everybody's cool with that?
Why would it be quadrant 1, 2? Yeah, why did it
Because this answer can't be in quadrant 1 because sine isn't negative in quadrant 1. And I did go all the way to 5 pi over 2. This is 3 pi over 2 down here. That's 2 pi. So that's 5 pi over 2 up there. So basically what I'm saying is that my answer has to be satisfy those two things. Where's the only place where both those two things happen? Quadrant 4, right? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to my unit circle, and I'm going to look in quadrant 4, and I'm going to be looking for where the y coordinate is negative root 2 over 2. So I go to my unit circle in quadrant 4. There's my y coordinate where it's negative root 2 over 2. So my answer should be 7 pi over 4. Now there's one final thing that I need to check, and it's I need to make sure this lies in that interval. And it does, right? 7 over 4 is the same as 1 3/4. 1 3/4 is between 1 1/2 and 2 1/2. So I'm satisfied that I've got this. Does that feel okay, Sophia?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm looking at a worksheet 2 problem, here we'd have like so maybe you're going to just use your calculator to find the angle for theta that satisfies this. Leave your answer in radians. So the first thing I want to do is figure out what quadrant the terminal side of my answer lies in. I'm going to do that the same way I did before. So this is the same thing as tangent theta equals negative 1.7. Tangent is just y over x. So when I divide two numbers and I get a negative answer, what has to be true about those two numbers? exactly one of them is negative, the other is positive. So either I have x is positive and y is negative, or I have x is negative and y is positive. Okay with that? This is quadrant 4, where x is positive but y is negative. This one is quadrant 2, where x is negative but y is positive. Okay with that? Now let's go ahead and figure out what angles are covered from things between negative pi over 2 to negative pi over, negative 2 pi to negative 1 pi. Again, we start on the positive x-axis, but because these angles are negative, we go clockwise. So negative 1, or negative a half, negative 1, negative 1.5 to negative 2. So here we're covering quadrants 2 and quadrants 1. What quadrant is an option for both places? Quadrant 2. So this is where the worksheet 2 problems differ a little bit. So I'm going to draw my picture. Here's the initial side of my angle, and I know my terminal side lies in quadrant 2 somewhere. Now I'm going to draw my theta with the rotation marks. So I start on the positive x-axis, and I'm going to rotate clockwise because it's a negative number, right? I know my answer is between negative 1 pi, or negative 2 pi and negative 1 pi. So negative a half, negative 1 pi, and that's my answer. So that's good because it's lying in between negative 1 pi and negative 2 pi. Good with that? So that's my theta. Now I'm going to draw in this other angle phi. It's called a reference angle. So that angle phi is always going to happen between the terminal side of my angle theta and the x-axis. Okay? So now to write my equation, I'm going to look at my picture and ask myself, and I'm going to compare anyways, theta and that other part of the x-axis. So is theta bigger or smaller than negative pi? It's a little tricky here. It's actually smaller because the angles are negative. It's going past negative pi, meaning it's more negative. Okay, so I should be then, since I know theta is less than negative pi, I need to subtract from negative pi. And how much am I subtracting? That angle phi. So the way I calculate that angle phi is I'm just going to take the inverse that I'm given in the problem, but I'm going to do the absolute value of the insides there. So that's the only catch here. The phi I have to use the absolute values of. Now when I type this into my calculator, Mr. Kulik's not bothering to type the absolute value symbol. He's just going to do that part in his head. How do you do the absolute value of something? You just make it positive. What if it's already positive? Then you don't have to do anything. You know, you already did the absolute value doesn't do anything. That's fine. So I do that. And so my answer is negative 418. I can check this, though. How do I check this? So I want to make sure that tan of that answer gives me negative 1.7. That looks good. And then I need to check to make sure it's bigger than negative pi over 2. Or I'm sorry, negative 2 pi. Yep, negative 4.2 is definitely bigger than negative 6.3. And I know negative pi is just negative 3.14, so negative 4 is definitely smaller than negative 3. So I'm definitely good there. So to check this, I just make sure it satisfies both of those two things. And I know I'm correct. Okay with that, Sophia?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. All right, let's stop here. So there's two questions where I ask you to use the calculator to find the angle in radians. No interval is given. So what does that mean? Focus here, please. I know. I'm talking to everybody else that's staring at you like awestruck. So again, two questions where I ask you to use the calculator to find the angle. So you just be given like, sine inverse of 0.6 or something. No interval given. What does that mean? Means you just type it in your calculator and just make sure you're in the right mode and write the number down afterwards. Right? Like that's all we're saying. Everybody's okay? It's like literally, can you type this into your calculator and get a number to come out? 4 questions where we asked to find the exact value of an angle in radians. So on that question, what are you what do you need to use? Oops. If it's asking for an exact value, what are you going to need to use? Unit circle. Already given to you on the test. What else do you need, though? You need the ranges for the inverses because no interval is given on that, right? Does it say on that, where the 4 questions, does it say I'm going to give you an interval? It does not. Okay? Does not say I'm giving you an interval, so you have to use the range for the inverses. So what do you need to make sure you write down on your note card? Those ranges. Okay? 2 questions where I ask you to find the exact value of a composition. What do I mean by that? So like we're talking about things like problems 11 to 14. Right? So we did some examples of those last time in class. Again, what do you need to do those problems? You got to remember the ranges. And because it's an exact value, what else are you going to be using? The unit circle.
What?
What do you mean, what?
Sorry.
She's going to crush it on herself.
2 questions where I ask you to find the angle on the given interval. That's a worksheet 2 problem, like you just did on the back side of your test. So whatever notes you need about how to do that, like what quadrants things are positive, negative in, anything like that. 1 question where I ask you to solve the triangle. Specifically, you're going to have to find the angle measures in that triangle. So what do you have to use to find an angle measure? An inverse function, right? Yep. And then there'll be 2 questions that are angle of elevation or angle of depression story problems. Any questions about the test format? Okay. So again, you should be working on your note card right now or your review, whichever one you'd like to do first. Ideally, you have your note card ready to turn in here today. I mean, try your best. If you have to turn it in later, I understand, but after I've given tests to people, can't turn it back in. Okay? So I got to have it in my hand before the test. Okay? If it's not today, you better get it to me Monday. Don't forget, write yourself like a 45 notes. You know what I mean? Come back during community time if you want to. That's fine. You know? At the end of the day, that's fine. I'm here for a few minutes after school. You know? Not too long because I have to go pick my daughter up. Everybody cool? Okay.